Ba-da-ba-da. Hello, Internet. My name is John Kulas. I'm a 20-year professor of industrial organizational psychology. I am a 10-year user of R for statistical applications. And for the last 6 or 7 years, I've also been using R to author technical reports and academic papers and presentations and websites. And so this live stream takes place every Friday at 2 o'clock Eastern, and we get together and work on authoring issues. Let me get my screen up here. Let me get R going. I restarted my computer just a second before we went live, which probably wasn't a good idea. I unplugged my modem, and I restarted my computer, and I lost my presentation too. So let's see if we can get that up. While we're waiting for R to load, let's go ahead and bring in one of our panelists here.
Vamos a ver, ¿qué es lo que pasa con los alcaldes? ¿Qué es lo que pasa con los alcaldes? ¿Qué es lo que sí, qué está pasando con los alcaldes?
Hey, hello.
Diego, how's it going? Why are you on? You're on my opposite side here. Let me see the layout. Restarting the computer was not a good idea. Layout's all messed up. I actually did not have that good of a start to the day, Diego. So I do these silly 8-year-old kid things like way too often. So this morning I had a ad that I saw that said you should add turmeric to your tea. I don't really turmeric. It's supposed to be good for you. I've been cleaning out my pantry, and I have all these spices, and I have this huge thing of turmeric because in my head I was gonna make my own curry at some point. And so I'm like, well, coffee and tea are in the same category of beverages, so I'll just put it in my. So I put a little bit in my coffee, and it's like gritty in my teeth, and it tasted like crap, but I still drank it. And then I went to wash out my coffee mug, and everything is yellow. My teeth are yellow. I don't know how many times I've brushed my teeth now. Usually I'm drinking coffee at this point, but I have a water because I don't think I can handle any more coffee.
Well, now we know a new prank trick.
Turmeric? Yeah. Well,
I'm gonna
yeah.
put turmeric on Danny's tea.
Well, I don't know if you should do. Oh, in tea, maybe it might taste different in tea, but yeah, it looks horrid in coffee. I wouldn't recommend it, but I guess it's it's not the worst prank because if it does have health benefits, if they get mad at you, at least maybe they'll be healthy. I don't know. We actually have another panelist here.
Dog goes woof, cat goes meow, bird goes tweet, and mouse goes squeak. Cow goes moo, frog goes croak, and the elephant goes toot. Ducks say quack, and fish go blub, and the seal goes ow, ow, ow. But there's one sound that no one knows. What does the fox say?
Ladies and gentlemen, fear not for my safety. After all, I am smart as a fox, you know.
Hello.
What's up, Casey? I'm getting a ton of lag on my end. Is it coming through okay for you guys?
Yeah.
I think so.
Every button I press is taking a while to actually show. So let's go ahead and you guys are here early. You may leave early because I'm not sure this is going to be the most exciting of short-term deals, and I'll try to motor through it. But we've been talking, or I've been alluding to the benefits of maybe going over some definitions here as we're learning this new platform of Quarto. And I got a little deep into it this week. So there's quite a few terms that I have prepared on slides this week. It's a little different from how we've been structuring this. But you guys feel free to move me along if we get too laggy on the terminology bit. And then there is one caveat there where something did come up earlier this week that might push the terminology off the shelf for today, and we might table it for maybe next week. And then hopefully I won't be too professorial in terms of my talking, and I can keep it short and sweet, and that'll let us get to the focal issue that we want to spend the most time and attention on, which is keeping momentum going on that dissertation template. We will do a quick recap of what happened last week, because I think that's always a good way to kind of just seal things up and maybe present the solution that we covered in a little more efficient manner.
Well, our heroes are all at sea, for Boris Badenov has tricked them into a leaky lifeboat, cut the cables, and watched them drift away in the fog. Little does he know that the boys have taken the priceless mooseberry bush with them, disguised as an old gentleman named Uncle Chumley.
Hey, Bullwinkle, this boat is leaking.
You know, I got the same sneaky feeling.
We gotta find something to plug up the holes.
I got this one stopped.
Yeah, but what about that one?
You might lend a hand, Uncle Chumley, instead of just sitting there.
Bullwinkle, I got an idea.
What is it?
Stand on your head.
Is that your idea of an idea?
Quick, we can use your antlers as plugs.
Sure enough, as fate would have it, when Bullwinkle stood on his head, the points of his antlers just fit the holes in the bottom of the boat.
It's working, Bullwinkle. You stopped the leaks.
Show us what you can do if you just use your head.
That's actually a great sequence of episodes, because Uncle Mulberry, Bullwinkle's just getting more and more frustrated with him, and he's just a tree that's dressed up like a person, and Bullwinkle never gets it. He just gets more and more upset. We talked about animations last week, and so we didn't really get to visual animations, but this is just a brief modification off of something that's on the Quarto website, which is an animation of shapes across slides. What we played with more was just kind of the textual animations, if textual is a word, text-based animations. And the controls for these are actually pretty easy. It just requires 2 consecutive slides to have this auto animate equals true specification. And then anything that's the same in terms of text will be matched, and the reveal program that underlies this particular slide format, that's going to recognize that and be able to match them. If you want to match shapes, you have to be a little more specific in terms of giving those different elements a different identification tag, and then those are going to be matched across the 2 different slides. Again, consecutive slides with that auto animate equals true. And then the text was pretty easy. We just used that auto animate equals true as well, and then we used a fit text to make the size of that second look at me come out larger. So just, again, not something that we were working on, not a hack that we had found, but just kind of a neat feature of Quarto that we stumbled across. And then in terms of the dissertation progress, the main thing that we did, we talked, and we'll have Diego fill us in again when we get to that point about email updates. But we were able to generate a default dissertation template of someone else's content, and pretty easily we could tweak the margins, which is going to be a graduate school specification at different institutions. They're going to want different types of margins, and we were able to do that in the YAML header, so that was really easy. And then this week, hopefully, we'll spend a little more time on trying to get more tweaks, maybe things like page numbers and placement. We can try to work on that front matter, people's signatures and acknowledgements and things like that, or whatever Diego wants to, we'll focus on. So today, if we don't do the definitions, there is kind of a new thing that came out this week, and that was a new version of Quarto. And so I put a few hyperlinks. There's a lot of hyperlinks in this week's session. Again, all these slides are available to anyone that wants to access them. And if you don't know how to access them via the GitHub link that we have on the YouTube comment description, not comment, I'm sorry. Just contact one of us and we can help you out. But if we don't spend time this week, fellas, on these Quarto updates, and these just came out on Wednesday. So Quarto 1.4 is new, and there's a bunch of new features on here. We could either go over this and table. Hey, look at that. There's a table. Maybe that means we should table the definitions. We can go over this and explore this a little bit and table the definitions, or we can do the definitions. I'm leaving that up to you guys. You guys vote. Or if you're watching, leave a comment. See what you want to do. Don't everybody speak up at once. All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Are you hearing okay? Diego, you're not muted, I see.
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, okay. You just don't want to contribute. I gotcha.
It's not that I don't want to contribute. It's just
don't want to weigh in on that?
It doesn't matter to me, you know.
Gotcha. Well, let's get this out of the way then, I guess, and we can come back to the Quarto features next week. Maybe we'll spend a little more time on looking into them as well. I just did a really quick overview myself, but we'll get this stuff out of the way. This is my first go at it, and so it's possible we may have to do this a second time once we're a little more seasoned using all of these, this new platform and getting to know it a little better under the hood. But I'll try to go through this quickly. Again, Diego and Casey, give me a poke or prod if it's really getting sluggish. These categories here, these aren't standard categories. I just came up with them to break this up a little bit since there are a lot of definitions that we're going to go over. And so universal, foundational, and applicable mean nothing to anyone other than us right here, as we're trying to understand the structure of Quarto and how the elements kind of fit together. And so universal, to me, these are concepts and things, entities, I guess, that are applicable well outside of Quarto, well outside of R, just universally true that people use in the realm of computers. And then foundational is going to be, these are largely HTML concepts, but they seem to have a lot of relevance for the way that Quarto is structured. And then the applicable stuff is all just directly Quarto stuff that with us, we're focused on using R within Quarto. So these are ways in which we can apply the left-hand column stuff with Quarto specifically. So the universals we'll go over first. HTML, this is a language. It's called the original markup language. And we also refer to it as a document format. So when we create HTML files, we'll call them HTML files, and that refers to the document. But really what it is it's the language. It's an acronym. So the hypertext markup language is the spelled out acronym. And browsers, Firefox, Chrome, etc., those are HTML processors. So they're able to turn the HTML to nice looking screen like what you see here. The HTML itself, it's all this stuff. It's all the stuff that you see in this upper right hand block here. And when they say markup, this is what they mean by markup. It's all this goop. It's all this goop in addition to the content that we actually have on, in this case, the slide itself, which is an HTML file presented in a browser, which is why it looks nice. So markdown is an attempt to kind of make that markup look less goopy. And so it's one way to think about it is a text to HTML conversion tool. And so HTML came out in the early 90s. So late 80s, early 90s seems to be when most of the work was initially done on it. And then about 10 years later, people started working on this markdown system. And so the markdown system, what they had as a philosophy is they wanted the content of those HTML files, they wanted the content to look more like an email. So the important stuff. And so really their orientation here was to have minimal markup in it. And we use RMarkdown using R. That's just one of many different forms of markdown that are currently available and in use. RMarkdown obviously is focused on R as a foundational language. We're gonna not spend a lot of time on it, but Pandoc is an important piece of software. It is what's called a universal document converter. And really what it does is it processes Markdown just like a browser processes HTML. Pandoc processes Markdown, and it processes Markdown in a way that can create many output formats. So the original Markdown was focused on producing only HTML. Pandoc can take Markdown scripting, and it can, out of that Markdown scripting, it can create PDFs, it can create Word documents, it can create HTML files. And so Pandoc is an important kind of back-end piece of software. And the PDFs, these are the original representations electronically of what for centuries we've used as representations of documents, which is paper. So it's again, like HTML, it's a file format. It's nice. One of the reasons that it's so beloved is because it has a standard appearance regardless of what type of operating system you're using or hardware or software you're viewing it through. It was a little confusing to me why everything became PDF when I started getting into using R to author. And one of the reasons for that is because the original people who developed this file format, Adobe, they released their hold on this. I don't know the technical legal terms for it, but they kind of said our proprietary rights on this in terms of us owning it and only us working on it, we're gonna let that go. And so that happened in 2008, and I think access to it has become a lot easier in that time, in the time between 2008 and now. So we're going to talk a little bit about the foundation of what Quarto uses to author things. So an element is just a part of a document, and this element typically consists of four things. We're going to make it really basic. It consists of four things. One is our opening tag. Here it's called a start tag in our little picture on the lower left, and it's enclosed by angle brackets. One of the reasons that YouTube, I try to make little comments in YouTube snips that we do that are just summaries of these weekly sessions. YouTube has a restriction that you can't use angled brackets, and I believe that's because they're processing that HTML, so it interferes with that processing capability. Attributes are important as well. Attributes here are within that opening tag. So there's a name and a value for attributes. Here the name is class and the value is foo. There's also content. Content is what the focus is of Markdown as a language. So the focus is the content is whatever you want to communicate. And then there's a closing tag or end tag. So start tag is also called an opening tag, and an end tag is also called a closing tag. Collectively, these four things form the basis of an HTML element. So those tags, they have opening and ending appearances. So not every tag needs an ending or a closing tag, but many of them actually do. So they're identified by those angle brackets. And tags are important because this is what communicates to browsers how they're supposed to display things. Now, this is going to become important for us as we look into Quarto, but there's a finite number of HTML tags. Currently, the version of HTML that is favored is HTML5, and I believe it's the fifth kind of big version. But there's about 150 tags that are recognized within HTML5. And that's actually, as I said, that's going to become important, I think. Or it's at least important to recognize. I think it actually has some implications for how Quarto is structured. There's two specific tags that Quarto focuses on, and those are called div and span. And so these two tags simply divide your information into different sections. And so the content within those different sections is going to be styled with something called cascading style sheets. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. There's also attributes within elements. So the attribute kind of defines how unique the element is displayed. And there's a common syntactic structure for this, we go attribute equals, and then usually in double quotes, what's the value of that attribute? Many attributes have default values, so they don't necessarily need to be specified directly. But if you want to change up the appearance of something, you're probably going to want to play with those attributes. And then not all attributes apply to all elements or even all tags. So that can have some implications as well. Two attributes that we're going to focus on that are important for Quarto are class and ID. And so these are attributes that help identify where we should direct our attention. And so one thing that I came across that I wasn't familiar with, because I'm just learning this stuff fresh myself, but there's a prefix used to identify a class attribute versus an ID attribute. And those differences are using the point or the period symbol and the hashtag symbol. And so I think that's that looks to me like it's mostly being held to and retained within Quarto. And so we'll see that when we get to our CSS files. So getting into Quarto specifically, what CSS is it's described as a language. I would probably frame it more as a syntactic structure. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets. And really what we're focused on here are style attributes. And so there's a finite number, just like there's a finite number of tags, there's also a finite number of properties that we can use to style elements. And there's I'm not going to click on that hyperlink, but it's there again in the slide deck if anyone's interested in further exploration of that. But the preferred way of styling HTML elements is not to have attribute within your tag. It's rather to call out a class or ID, and that class or ID is referenced in a cascading style sheet. We'll see what that looks like in a little bit. So the picture on the right here is showing you the structure of CSS syntax, and the selector is what you're referring to. It's the class. If it's a actual tag, then it's going to be an existing class. And then there's curly brackets. And then one of the important specifications of CSS syntax structure is that semicolon at the very end of the line. That doesn't signify the end of the CSS statement. It simply signifies the end of the line. So all lines added to this, if we were to add more properties to this particular class beyond color, they would all be structured similarly. A property on the left, and then the value of the property, and then semicolon. Those semicolons are important. LaTeX is similar to CSS, but traditionally it's been used to structure and style PDF documents. And again, the philosophy here is let's leave the focus of content providers on the content itself, and then we can leave design aspects to other people. And so it has a similar effect as CSS, but it's structured quite a bit differently. Now I have a note here, and this is one of the things that I want to cover. If we don't do it this week, we can do it in a subsequent week. But there's a new type of document that was released in that Quarto 1.4. In that Quarto 1.4, I guess, what do you call it? What do you call an announcement like that? Feature announcement or whatever it is. They actually had a little press release. I'm sorry, that's what I was thinking, was press release. They had a little press release about the new Quarto, and in that press release, one of the things that they highlighted was this new document format. And so if you want to check it out, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right, but to me that spells typist. But typist is an attempt to maybe restructure some of that LaTeX syntax. I hadn't heard of it before Wednesday, but again, one of these weeks we'll probably delve into it. So you can see in that white screen background there that the structuring of LaTeX commands, just visually it looks a little cluttered. And in fact, this is a markup language, or at least I would characterize it as a markup language similar to HTML. Now here's where the rubber meets the road, kind of, and why all of this stuff is important is because Quarto uses what are called fences and brackets. So fences and brackets, and this is my interpretation, are Quarto's attempts to really make styling choices to not be tied to your output format. So that is, we don't necessarily need to use LaTeX. We don't necessarily need to use CSS. Can we use something in between that can communicate to both types of formats? And that's always been a struggle when we try to author projects within R. One of the first questions when you're branching out in terms of what direction do we go historically has been, well, what kind of document do you want to produce? Do you want a Word document? Do you want a PDF? Do you want an HTML? And Quarto, the orientation anyway, is fantastic. They want to make that decision non-important at early stages in the document creation phase. They're not quite there yet, but they're making so many advancements. I'm sure they're going to get there eventually. So what they're doing is they're kind of taking more of a CSS flavor, and that's why we focused more on HTML things. I don't want to call it an element because there is an HTML element, but the reason we focus more on HTML terminology than LaTeX terminology was because Quarto seems to have leaned a little more towards the CSS structuring than the LaTeX structuring. And so they are focused on these tags of div and span. And so we're going to be using these to isolate sections of our authoring projects. And so within Quarto, they use fences to identify divs. And that's going to be a big block or a larger block of content that you want to isolate. Brackets are going to be used for isolating smaller chunks of content. And so, excuse me. So those fences, they're also called fenced divs because what they're doing is they're creating an HTML div tag. But in Quarto, the way that we specify them isn't through angled brackets, start brackets and end brackets. We identify them through colons. And so we have 3 colons here, and those 3 colons identify that, well, there's a fenced div here that's starting on our right-hand picture. It's starting on line 6 and going through line 8. Got to be careful with these fenced divs because the spacing can get really finicky. It can get really picky. And we've had these issues with RMarkdown for years. It used to be more, I think, evident when we were knitting to a PDF than an HTML file. But again, with Quarto, the idea at least is that your end goal in terms of what you want to produce isn't so important. So that persnickety-ness of spaces, you're gonna have to watch out about those. The one of the features of these fenced divs is nesting is okay. So what I actually have here is I have 2 fenced divs nested within each other. So the inner fence is saying, take this statement, take this element, take this content of what you're talking about, Willis, and apply a different style to it. So the style is an HTML attribute. It's saying I want this font to be in color red. Okay, that's fine. But beyond that, I'd also like to structure this information such that what you're talking about, Willis, and Nada Mucho Amigo are going to be in 2 separate columns. But I want what you're talking about, Willis, to be in the color red in terms of its syntax. We can do that if we nest these fences. So nesting just means encasing one within another one. And the reason I'm mentioning nesting here is because it's in HTML circles, it's favored to do nesting with divs as opposed to spans. And so fences are Quarto's equivalent of divs, or Quarto's specification of divs. And so if we're to be consistent with the desired way to structure our files, we may want to be more likely to use nests with fences rather than spans. I'm sorry, rather than brackets. We're talking about terminology, and I'm flip-flopping on my terms already. Now, I will say that even though nesting is recommended within fences more so than brackets, these slides, if you take a look at the source files for these slides, the fencing gets really messy really quickly. That is, it's very difficult to identify yourself if you nest quite a bit, where one starts and the other stops. And so I'm not sure I'm much in favor right now at this early stage of using Quarto with the idea of nested fences, but we'll probably have to get used to it. And again, Quarto keeps making all sorts of advancements. And so that might be something that gets slightly tweaked. One other thing that we're going to have to get used to is the brackets. These curly brackets are identifying what attributes we want to apply. But there's a slight difference in syntactic structure that you'll notice if you start to use this frequently. Sometimes there's a class that's called out. This is the grouping of elements that I'm interested in affecting. And sometimes it's a dot class. And so that dot class versus class, initially, I thought that had to do with pre-existing tags and attributes versus created tags and attributes. But that doesn't seem to be universally true. So we still have a little more investigation to do on that before we really understand if there is kind of meaning behind the madness with regard to the use of that dot specification versus not having that dot specification. I can do a similar thing, and I didn't nest it here, so I only did one. I only did one styling on this command. What you talking about, Willis? And here, this is the way to do it through bracketed spans. So again, spans, the intent is these stylings are going to occur to more isolated, smaller chunks of content, whereas those fences can be applied to larger chunks. And if you're familiar with HTML, the fences are analogous to HTML divs, and the brackets are analogous to HTML spans. Not only analogous, but in the Markdown syntax that we're using here, they actually end up producing divs and spans if we look behind the scenes, under the hood at the actual HTML.
Why does it say swim a lot, my friend?
Why does it say what?
In Spanish there. Nada mucho, mi amigo.
I don't know. That's a common Spanish phrase that all Americans know. If you don't know any Spanish, you know what that means. Nada mucho, mi amigo. Maybe it's because if someone says "que pasa," that's kind of the go-to comeback, right?
Oh, that's a bad translation of.
Is it?
Not much, friend.
What should we do instead? So if someone says "que pasa," Diego, what should be my response?
No mucho, mi amigo.
No mucho? What if I don't like the guy? What if he's not my friend? Just no mucho, huh?
Yeah, or simply nada.
I love that we're talking syntax and terminology and structure, and there's a grammatical error there on line 6 with our translation. All right. So that kind of was a lot of information. I think we'll probably have another one. I'm going to chop this up, and hopefully my umming and erring wasn't too terrible, and my presentation wasn't too erroneous with that. But I wouldn't be surprised if we come back to this after we've used Quarto again for another, let's say, year or so and refine these terms a little bit. But one thing I noticed just this last week, kind of digging into this and trying to understand the structure of Quarto and where it comes from and what it relates to, is it's now so much easier for me to navigate those Quarto help pages, just having that little bit of terminology, specifically the fences with the div tag and the brackets with the span tag. That's very, very helpful. And then the Quarto has built in some classes that you can use within those curly brackets. And those should work across output formats, excluding some exceptions. And one exception is interactive elements. For example, there's a fragment option that you can apply within slide decks such as this. And the reason I mention it is because I'm using it in this slide. So when we're kind of slowly revealing the content, that's called a fragment, and that's not going to be something that is operative within different format outputs. And then probably what we're finding out as we try to get fancy with our documents is we still need LaTeX, HTML, or CSS. I keep going back to CSS. And Casey has actually structured some sassy CSS, which is a newer implementation of CSS. It's just slightly different in terms of its syntactic structure. But it's helpful to know these things if you really want to control the look and output of your information. And then just finally, the way that this is all used within Quarto is very similar to how it was used in our Markdown, the predecessor to Quarto. We are authoring within these QMD files, and then the QMD file goes to an engine. For us, because we use R, that engine's called knitr. If you're using Python or Julia or Observable, the engine is going to be different. It's going to be specific to that operating platform. But regardless of what language you're using, we're taking this input, in our case, a QMD file, a Quarto file, and then the engine produces a Markdown script. Now that Markdown script goes to Pandoc, that free software, which is capable of turning Markdown into all kinds of different output. Now, there's a slight tweak with Quarto as opposed to the previous version. The new version of Pandoc uses something called a Lua filter. And I don't understand the technicalities of that, but it has something to do with pre-processing that was previously necessary that had to take place at earlier stages in this flowchart. So knitr, for example, had to do some processing early on, and they wanted to take that away from knitr and move it later in the process. So earlier stages are more universally applicable to Python or Julia or Observable, or again, and this is kind of fun to think about, whatever language might exist in the future that we don't yet know about. Okay, that wasn't as terrible as I was dreading that it might actually be. So Diego, there's the Doctor Strange thing. I got to keep my window away. Diego, can we maybe turn the screen share over to you, and you can bring us back and remind us what's going on with the dissertation stuff, and we can try to make a little progress on that.
Yeah.
Let's see if I have any new video drops I can show while he's doing that.
Stuff. So yeah, I sent it to. I sent another batch of emails to my professors, but they haven't responded yet. My former professors.
Okay. Yeah. So one thing. So Diego's completing his dissertation in industrial and organizational psychology. We are creating a template that the graduate school will accept for his content. His content is separate. Again, he's fine with that. He's PhD level with his content, but the formatting we're going to need to do a little work on. And so before we get too far, we wanted to just check with his institution to see if anyone at the institution may already be using a template that can help produce something like a graduate school approved formatted dissertation. And so traditionally the way that's been done is through LaTeX. But we're seeing now with Quarto that there's going to be several different ways, several different routes that we can take. And while Diego's are you rendering that or knitting that, Diego?
This is just the dissertation. When I render it, it is not on the right format, really. It's on it's the right format and APA style, but it's not like it doesn't have like the cover page for a dissertation and all that stuff.
Right, but so we had a couple different routes, right? We could have taken Papaja, the package, and kind of played with that, or we could have taken thesis down, which there's a bunch of different iterations of that are already out there for different universities and done that. But we decided to focus on dissertate USU, right?
Yep.
You like rendering it in that copy edited journal format.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm the only one that likes it.
No, I like it too, but the grad school is not going to like it. I think that's what you send out to your committee, because your committee's probably going to appreciate. Your committee's probably going to appreciate that. We have a comment from Danielle. That's nice. I'll say hi, Danielle.
So this one's the one that we create with the dissertate USU CLS, which is
Okay,
pretty cute.
Yeah, I think we play with that, right? Because we're at the point now where we have to decide what route we're going to take.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's... Oh, I messed up. I just wonder if there's any other CLS. But I guess that's what I have to figure out. I might go in person, talk to my former professors, because they're not answering the emails for some reason.
So CLS is a type of LaTeX file. It's a class file that specifies LaTeX formatting. And so Diego, what you're saying is you're wondering if someone at Montclair, which is your university, has a CLS file, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's why we put out that email, because we worded it not that specifically, right? We're just like, does anyone know how to do this? I think we'll still go through this exercise of us trying to do it ourselves, because that's kind of the point of this whole live stream, is we and people in the chat can try to Google how to do this, and collectively we can try to figure it out. But maybe to start with, Diego, can you just knit the default dissertation that you get through dissertate USU, and then we can see how much it deviates from what Montclair State's desired format looks like, and then we can just work on tweaking it. Unless you want to take a different route, but I thought we came to the decision that we're probably going to focus on this one.
Yeah, because this one looks pretty good. I could also maybe talk to Dr. Val and ask her if this would be acceptable.
Well, yeah, I mean, so there's kind of two levels of interest for you. One is just getting out of there and getting your degree. So you might want to check and see if that's acceptable. But the other one is us continuing building our skills with in this case, it's not Quarto, it's RMarkdown, but those skills are transferable. So I think we still want to focus on this, right?
And also, if we have the right CSL, could we just use it Quarto? Just like what happens if we use this CSL and put it on Quarto? Would it do the same thing as that Papaja and dissertate USU do?
It would be fine, but remember, there's two different file types that look very similar. There's the CSL, which is the citation style language. That's just your references. That's just saying, give me your references. And then, yeah, it confused me so much. First time I came across it too was the CLS. It's unfortunate, but that stands for LaTeX class. And that's the one that I think we want to find. Although when we looked down through the body of that RMD, and anyone watching, this is an RMD, not a QMD. This process that we're exploring to solve this solution is actually was baked in the old platform, not the new one. I mean, see, it looks to me like a lot of what would be in the CLS file is actually there. Now, he even has tech chunks. So those tech chunks, we could take them and put them in a CLS file, or we could just try to work within the constraints of what he has structured here. Can we try to find, Diego, which one of those? Let's do this. We have about 10 minutes. Let's see if we can identify which elements within that RMD are controlling, let's say, the front page. Or let's pick a section of that default document, and then we'll poke and we'll prod, and we'll see, if I press this part of the brain, does the right leg kick or does the left leg kick?
Okay.
It still tastes that turmeric.
Did you hear about the turmeric thing, Casey?
Sorry, what was that?
I had an incident this morning.
Okay.
So Diego, let's talk this through a little bit. So if people are watching, that can maybe help out. So can you pull up and maybe blow up in size a little bit, Diego, what the rendered document looks like? Or yeah, your screen too, that would help.
This might be too much. So here in the YAML.
Well, let's just go line by line a little bit. Let's take a look at that. In the YAML, let's go slow through the YAML and see if there is something there that we've missed. Because my understanding was if there's a CLS specified, it should be specified in the YAML. And there's stuff here that we haven't used, right? That's new to us, like that geometry option. I've never seen that.
Yeah, geometry. This is just for the inches. On each side of the page. And
but I wonder if he created that.
So we want to figure out how this page was created. Just this.
Okay, let's do that. That's tangible. So can you blow that up? Let's take a look at it. Is that the very first page, or is there something before that?
No, this is the first page.
Okay, blow it up a little bit more, Diego. Okay. Okay, so there's a couple of things on there that we can just do a search for and see where the content is, right? So U is something that's going to be swapped out. I think that's probably in your YAML. And then your committee members are probably in there too. So U is probably above line 8, right?
Yeah. Yeah, here.
So put Figgy in there and let's see if we can...
Time flies.
Well, maybe Diego, you want to just try a couple of them and see if it knits and see if it has the desired effect, and then we'll try to find where the formatting elements are to get the boilerplate stuff.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. You doxed yourself. You told people where you are. I don't think there's going to be many ruffians going to Montclair, though. One of the nicest cities I've ever lived in.
Montclair?
Oh, I love Montclair.
Are you saying that because we're on recording right now?
No, I said that to many people. I think it's one of the nicest places I've ever lived. Now it hasn't. It wasn't like where I was most comfortable, or there's different different aspects of living that, I wouldn't put on my top 10 list or top 5 list, but just as a general place to live and be, I thought it was great. Except when it snows. Whew. I want to be caught there if it snows a foot.
You're from Minnesota and you're complaining about the snow?
Hey, we deal with the snow. You guys, I'm lumping you into a category of people. You guys, you get legitimate dumped on. So those nor'easters, if you get 2 feet of snow, I understand how paralyzing that is. And philosophically, it's easier to deal with because it's going to be gone in a week. If we get 2 feet, well, first of all, we get 2 feet of snow like once every 15 years, maybe. But it doesn't go away if we get it. It stays, and it's just going to be there for, basically November through almost April. November through March, I'd say. It's snow on the ground. But so the implications of that, one of the implications of that is we have the infrastructure to deal with it. So we have plows, and when I was living in Atlanta, people don't think like they do in the Midwest because there's all kinds of little hills and inclines and what I call compound inclines. So it'll go north and south up, but then it'll also tilt. So like no one would make a driveway or sidewalk here that does that because it's going to get icy and slippery and you're going to crack a rib. But so I'm yammering here while you're looking at stuff. But so in Atlanta, we had a couple of ice situations and it was ridiculous because like there were pictures of people trying to leave their houses and they would be on a residential street and they would have a little incline both and they would just slide down to the bottom and they'd be sitting there. But the same thing happened in Jersey, in Montclair specifically, when we got one of those really bad dumpings, was there's so much incline and there's so little capability of dealing with it because it's going to be gone in a week anyway. It's not going to last for 4 months. But you just leave it there until it melts. But when it's doing it, everyone's just paralyzed. Like there were cars that were just stuck. There were cars that were just sitting in the road for, I don't know, at least 12 hours. So one of your professors was stuck on 13 there for, I don't know how long. So how much progress have you made while I was yammering, Diego?
I just looked at the format for Montclair here. So here, this is the difference.
Okay. Well, let's
so this is what we got now, and this is what we want to achieve.
Okay, so maybe let's do content. Can you blow up the very top of that and see what it says? And I'm using the term boilerplate, which is probably an old term, and I'm not sure it applies. But we used to use that term to apply to like any standard template thing that doesn't change. Where around it you might have dynamic content that does. So for me, can you blow that up, Diego, so we can see what that content is on the Montclair State version? At the top, right underneath the red circles. I'm looking at that where it says Montclair State University, the graduate school dissertation approval, right? Can we try to take that content and get it to render? I'm using Quarto terminology now. Can we get it to knit on your RMD? So let's replace what's in the current template with what we know we want, and then we'll consider that a win for today. And then for next week, we'll spend a little more time off screen taking a look and seeing where we need to direct our attention to do these sorts of tweaks. Because if you're watching, and if you're still watching, thanks for watching, by the way. But if you are watching, we haven't really done any research on this. Diego's really busy with his content of his dissertation. Dude, he can't deal with it. That's one way to put it. So I think like off camera between this week and next, at least Diego, you and I, because we have a regular meeting on Tuesday, and unless something comes up with regard to our typical projects, we could actually maybe take a little look at this. But maybe in your RMD, Diego, do you want to do a search for whatever currently is in the template? If you blow that up a little bit, we can see.
Blow up this, you mean?
No, we know what's there. The other one, what we want to replace, we just need to find where that's specified.
Like, for example, here, instead of putting dissertating for USU, I would put what's there on the red circle.
Okay, try it. I mean, we're literally just kind of hunting and pecking and trying here.
Let's try that.
So again, with all this markdown and markup stuff, content is going to be separate from the styling of it. And so content, I think, is going to be the easy piece. The styling of it, that's what we're going to have to do off camera, is figure out where those commands are located so we can go in and change them and tweak them. Compulsive testing and academic functioning. That's weird that they left justify that title, isn't it? It looks askew. You can tell your professor that we used that description, Diego. That title looks askew.
What does askew mean?
Off.
You're saying Dr. Skew is off?
No, I wouldn't say that. But I love doing crosswords. I do a crossword puzzle and a Sudoku every morning. And askew is sometimes an answer that comes up. The clue is usually like off or awry. I think it refers to like just a visual or linear misalignment. It doesn't mean skew like the statistical distribution skew. And I'm gonna have to bug out here too pretty soon, guys. So I think let's see if we can. What did you change, Diego, and where did it put it in your local rendered document?
I just changed the title.
So you put in the grad school template title.
Yeah, and now I'm trying to figure out how to put Montclair State University, the grad school dissertation proposal, instead of by me, dissertation submitted, blah blah blah. I guess I don't know.
We might actually have to create. We may have to create new fields, like your title and author fields. We can create new fields and specify where they're rendered and what they look like. So we may actually have to do that.
How do I do that? Create new fields? What do you mean by creating new fields? Like instead of author, I create something else?
Yeah, but we have to define that. we have to tell the computer that there's a new element called getting figgy with it, and then we define what getting figgy with it, what it takes as input, and what it looks like as output. That's why we need to get under the hood here and look at that CLS. But I think you have some CLS down below. So Diego, can you do this? Do you want to, and then I'm going to have to pop off, I think, guys. But can you copy that middle bit and dissertate USU? And let's just do a find. Let's see if it's anywhere on that page. If it's not on the page, then we know it's in a supplementary file, something like a CLS file that we're just not seeing. Do you see that anywhere, Diego?
Let's see. Let's see geometry. No, I don't think this is the...
Okay. Is that a tech file that you're opening up? A TEX extension? Is that
No, this is the CLS.
Oh, you did find the CLS.
Yeah, dissertate USU CLS.
Sweet. Okay. All right, that's great, because that was one of the big questions we had, is where the heck is that? Maybe blow that up, Diego, a little bit.
Yeah, let me do this.
And we should be able to do a lot of the formatting that we want within that file. Yay. Those packages, we might want to add different packages too. So those packages are not any different than our packages. They're just focused on doing specific things within LaTeX. You need them if you want to do like special fonts or even different layouts, columns, and things like that. No, they don't need them like R, but it makes it a lot easier if you have them. And they're as easily accessible as they would be through R.
I remember Fancy for making the headers.
Okay, cool. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to have to go.
Okay.
A little earlier than normal this week. So, Diego, maybe you and I off camera on Tuesday, we'll spend a little more time looking into this, and we can see if we can find it. And then next week, hopefully we'll spend more time on the dissertation format specifically. We can spend less time on the short-term issue. I think the short-term issue next week, unless anyone has anything that they want covered, I think the short-term issue next week will probably just be covering that 1.4 release of Quarto and seeing what's new in there. Checking out that typist thing, seeing what that's all about.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, awesome. I'll see you guys hopefully next week. Diego, I'll see you on Tuesday. All right, have a good weekend.
Bye, have a good weekend.